Good afternoon, everyone. Maupay nga kulop ha aton nga tanan. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Welcome to Huruhisgutay, an online discussion series on vital environmental issues and concerns in Eastern Visayas. Today, environmental conservation is definitely an urgent priority concern. Problems like the continued depletion of our natural resources, global warming, unabated environmental pollution and degradation are just some of the serious issues and concerns that affect each and every one of us and the future generations. If left unattended, this planet, which we call our home, will sooner or later be unable to provide and sustain our basic human needs. Huruhisgutay, which in English means environmental discussion, is an online project that aims to contribute to the sustained effort of saving the world from irreversible ecological destruction. More specifically, Huruhisgutay is a project that seeks to discuss and analyze urgent environmental issues and concerns in Eastern Visayas. By promoting and strengthening cooperation and collaboration between and among entities, Huruhisgutay seeks to assist in the formulation of appropriate policy initiatives that will further advance the purposes and goals of environmental conservation in Eastern Visayas. This afternoon's episode is entitled Huruhisgutay Number 3, Climate Proofing and Resilience in Eastern Visayas. In this episode, the members of our discussion panel will underscore and bring to the surface issues and concerns that are related to the notion of climate proofing and resilience from within the context of development work, most especially in Eastern Visayas. Issues and concerns that are related to this perspective and process are vital, most especially because Eastern Visayas is one of the regions in the country that is often devastated by natural calamities like typhoons. In other words, government and non-government entities should be able to factor in, integrate, and operationalize notions of climate proofing into their own development agenda effectively. At this point, allow us to introduce to everyone the distinguished members of this episode's discussion forum. Our first panel member serves as the head of the Partnership Development and Management Unit of the Climate Change Commission. He is an alumnus of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines and is currently pursuing his Master in Communication degree at that same university. He has consistently dedicated his expertise and wealth of professional experiences with the Climate Change Commission for the past 11 years and continues to handle public and media relations, social media management, knowledge product development, and capacity building activities for youth organizations, local government units, higher education institutions, and national government agencies. Friends, we are honored to have with us Mr. Huruhisgutay. Our second panel member is a certified environmental planner who also specializes in Geographic Information System or GIS, as well as remote sensing, local land use and physical planning, environment and natural resources management, and public resource management. His publications include a practical guide on the preparation of local climate change data, risk maps for the support of reconstruction after Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and fractal dimension and patchiness in Hinabian-Lawigan watershed southern Leyte, Philippines. He currently serves as a Senior Economic Development Specialist of the National Economic Development Authority, Region 8. He was with us in our first episode of Huruhisgutay, which discussed the topic entitled Setting the Directions for Environmental Conservation in Eastern Visayas. Friends, please welcome once again Mr. J.R. Ragub. Our lead discussant currently serves as the chairperson of the Division of Natural Sciences and Mathematics of UPV Tacloban College. He earned his PhD in Environmental Science from UP Los Baños. He is a recipient of the 1 UP Professional Chair Award in Research and Public Service and is listed as one of the resiliency experts of the UP system. He played a vital role in the accomplishment of the research project entitled Forecasting to Communication to Action, Enabling Institutions to Manage Storm Surge Risks, which was done under the auspices of the New York University and the World Bank in Yolanda-affected areas in eastern Visayas. Moreover, his published research outputs are now part of the lesson plans used in the Grade 5 Science curriculum of the Department of Education, Region 8. Our lead discussant is a main proponent in the implementation of the Master of Science in Environmental Science program of UP Visayas Tacloban College, which has been adopted from the UPLB School of Environmental Science and Management. This graduate program is designed to play a major role in providing solutions to environmental problems that affect Eastern Visayas. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to present to you Dr. Yulito V. Casas.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. To our organizers, led by Dr. Stephen Lagarde, and to our distinguished panel of the actors today. Good afternoon. Today marks the third episode of this series of Hisgut Kalibungan, of which I am tasked to present a topic which is close to my heart, entitled Climate Proofing the Coastal Zones in Eastern Visayas, a Climate Resiliency Investment for the Future. My presentation will follow the following questions. An explanation of why we need to do climate proofing, how it is being conducted, and what are the challenges in coastal development, of which the project on climate proofing is focused, and what are the existing policies, and why are these policies not seem to work in real situation, and what are the relevant policy issues related to these presentations, then a discussion on what must be done. Climate proofing is a GIZ tool. I was introduced to this tool in 2011 during their series of trainers training. In fact, I was also hired as consultants by GIZ in their 2 climate proofing of DNR projects. So it is about creation of climate change resilient development plans, programs, and projects. I prefer to use this term because I had a formal training on this. Although the concept may appear similar to other approaches being conducted at present, especially those programs proposed or are being implemented by NEDA and DNR perhaps, and also by the Climate Change Commission. Now, we did a climate proofing project, and this will serve as our benchmark in the discussion of this forum. And our focus is the coastal zone, specifically, the ecosystems found in these coastal zones, which are the mangroves and the beach forest, which can serve as green belt or green shields, or sometimes in other literatures they are called as living shorelines, which shields or protect the land-based ecosystem, including the people and infrastructures, from being destroyed by strong typhoons, surges, and tsunamis. As these ecosystems are strategically positioned along the sea coast, thereby protecting the land-based zones from coastal inundation. We have noted in our project that existing conditions such as the presence of coastal residences, land claimants, and other structures exhibited the greatest challenges in the realization of coastal development projects. And so we refer this to the existing environmental conditions on coastal areas and share with you our experiences, challenges, and lessons learned, and recommend some policy recommendations which are prescribed as our way forward. Now, this is the vulnerability function of GIZ. Okay, as you can see, there are 5 components there. The exposure, sensitivity, potential impacts, adaptive capacity, and vulnerability. Exposure refers to the location of the site. And sad to note, there is nothing we can do about location. When we say Eastern Visayas is the center of all the centers of climate change impacts as exhibited by the force of Yolanda, then that's what we are. We cannot do anything about that. But somehow we can decrease our vulnerability by looking into the sensitivity of the system of interest, which refers to the degree to which the biophysical system can be affected negatively or positively by changes in climate. The impact of climate change on the biophysical system measures its sensitivity, and the overall effect with its exposure or location will give the potential impacts, which is the potential effect of a climate change hazard on a system of interests, which can also be positive or negative. In our case, we refer to the coastal ecosystem as the system of interest. Now, this potential impact has to be also considered with the adaptive capacity of the system of interest, which is the ability of the social system to adjust to climate change to moderate damage, take advantage of opportunities, or cope with consequences. Adaptive capacity is a function of the relative level of society's economic resources, access to technology, and access to climate information. Okay, together, the potential impacts and the adaptive capability would represent the vulnerability of the system of interest or the location of our study. Now, from this condition, where sensitivity is very high and adaptive capacity is very low, therefore potential impact is also very high, vulnerability becomes very high. We want to climate-proof our system of interests by looking into the biophysical system. If it is a coastal ecosystem, then we evaluate the condition of the natural ecosystems there, which are the beach forest, the mangrove forest, the seagrasses, and the coral reefs, and rehabilitate these biophysical systems in order to minimize potential impact of climate change. Together with this is the empowerment of the coastal communities through intensive information and education campaign, thereby reducing vulnerability. So this is the ideal condition we want to meet after climate proofing a given system of interest. Okay, I am sharing with you here on the process on how climate proofing is done based on the GIZ framework. So what you have here is the system of interest on the left side of the screen. Then how this system of interest is affected by climate projections, we call as climate lens. What are the climate changes, and how these changes would potentially affect the exposure unit, which are the location, and its direct impact here, like extreme flooding, damage to building, biodiversity loss, forest fire hazard, decreased groundwater and coastal inundation. On the biophysical side, on the socioeconomic side, we look into the society, as affected by the climate change impact. Especially the socio-economic systems, the health services, the livelihood, food security, water supply, and the like. And what are the possible indirect impacts that may cause changes on the socio-economic systems? It may include increasing energy use, flattened coastal settlements, damage on low-cost shelters, increasing health-related concerns, water scarcity for domestic use, fire hazard, damage to flooding and landslides, including storm surge. Then we do vulnerability assessment. Okay. And defining the vulnerability would give us the idea on what to do, on how to address the vulnerability. Here I'm using the framework of sustainable development, social adaptations, economic adaptations, and environmental management. The three pillars of sustainable development. Now, for Tacloban, based on that framework, the following is the vulnerability assessment. Increasing temperature, sea level rise, extreme rainfall variability, and super typhoons, causing high storm surge, flattening the coastal areas, affecting infrastructures and families, extreme flooding and drought, threatening settlements, water and food supply, health, livelihood, business, and the like. Okay, indeed, climate change can create enormous impact, both on the biophysical and on the socioeconomic aspects. Therefore, the solution is to climate-proof, and one of the strategies adopted is the establishment of green shields or green belt. This is practically the use of nature. Beach forest, mangrove forest, seagrasses, and coral reefs are known to reduce the velocity of wave and the impact of strong winds. Therefore, they need to be rehabilitated because they have this natural power to combat against the impacts of super typhoon and storm surge. And with this, we can to some degree achieve a level of coastal resilience. Thus, climate proofing is proposed as a comprehensive approach to climate risk management that can prevent loss of life, reduce economic impacts, and enhance disaster resilience. Okay, I'm sharing with you the output of our climate proofing project. This was led by PH Hayan Advocacy Cooperative under the supervision of PENRO, Provincial Office of Leyte, DNR. As you can see, there is an interconnected ecosystem from the open sea into the coral reefs. We move towards the land base. We have the seagrasses, the mangroves, the intertidal flat that defines the boundary of the land and the water. Then on the land base, we have the beach forest, and we have laws that regulate, the salvage and buffer zone protection. Then we have the community. Okay, the rest of the pictures here is the output of our project in Tacloban City. We also included here a bathymetric mapping of the Talcabato Bay, and we also noted that the contour of Talcabato Bay was changed because of the impact of Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. Okay, now it has been told, and there are evidences that indeed mangroves can save life, and there were a lot of testimonies from survivors. This large tree here, we had 5 people that cling to this tree that survived. This one here, you see the bag here of an old woman Dito po siya nalagay, no? After the impact of Super Typhoon. This is in Anibong, part of Tacloban City. So indeed, no, this experience would prove that we really need to protect these coastal ecosystems because they also protect us against super typhoon. These are pictures of our mangrove reforestation in the northern part of Tacloban, the last barangay. And as a belt, no, or a green shield, our botanical garden in UP is a good example. In fact, during the onslaught of Super Typhoon Haiyan, lesser damage was caused into our building because of this thick forest in between our campus and the sea. I also want to share with you, that climate proofing can be done, and one good example is our project with Professor Margarita de la Cruz, our previous dean here in Maliwaliw, Salcido Island. This is the map of the island, and we train them, to construct green belts. We inform them about the climate change impacts, the climate lens, and then ask for their support to secure the coastal area to be converted into green belt or green shield. That means they have to move a little towards the land, and reserve the space as protection zone. And we also impart on them, on how to raise some seedlings, especially bamboo. And then later, they did the planting, Okay. And what I'm saying is that we can empower people to act to respond, to climate change impacts. They just need to be informed. Okay. Now, I have here the list of existing laws, policies that we have in the Philippines, with regards to beaches and mangroves. Of course, we have PD 705, the revised Forestry Reform Code of the Philippines, the Water Code of the Philippines, and the Water Act, the Philippine Fisheries Code, the Civil Code of the Philippines, the Climate Change Act, which mandates the creation of the Climate Change Commission, and then the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Acts. Okay. These are our legal arsenal, environmental policies to protect our coastal areas. Now, this becomes a contentious issue, because in designing coastal green belt or reforestation, it should be reckoned or delineated where nature should be. And according to these laws, there must be a buffer zone or salvage protection zone to serve as green belt, which is about 20-meter wide from the seashore, towards the land. So I took this from the internet, when this is a book written by a foremost environmental lawyer, in the Philippines, Attorney Antonio Posa. I had some, acquaintances with him in the past. He has compiled all environmental policies in the Philippines. He called it the legal arsenal, and he found out that we have already much of these laws. You see, it's very thick. And so he is some sort of making an advice to everyone. This is an inscription at the back of that book, that says we may learn to make less laws. Instead, we may learn to make them work, with just a little bit. Okay, emphasizing therefore on the issue, of non-implementation of existing policies, Philippine policies. Okay, example, this buffer zone or salvage zone, which is 20 meter at least, in fact, it was increased to 40, which we call now as the no-belt zone, is where the government built protective measures by constructing seawalls, retaining walls or tidal flood control structures to keep the settlement in the inland safe. No, it is being reserved under the Water Code of the Philippines. And the same law provides that no person shall be allowed to stay, in this zone longer than what is necessary for recreation, navigation, floatage, fishing or salvage, or to build permanent structures of any kind. In the case of Tacloban City, the Nobel Zone is about 216 hectares if we apply the law, because the linear distance of the coast of Tacloban is 56 kilometers. You multiply it to 20 meters, then you have the Nobel Zone, supposed to be in all the surveys zone. Now, I'm referring this presentation to some, good practices or practice being done in the Philippines when we have laws and how these laws are being regarded, in certain places. Well, let me cite the case of Boracay, which is very known to us. A Boracay resort demolition was conducted in order to establish the Nobel Zone, and the lead office here is the DANR. Also, environmental charges were imposed on the resort owners that are polluting the bay, and some are being filed cases for polluting Boracay. So my question is, if these laws are being implemented in Boracay, and Boracay is part of the Philippines, and the laws cover the whole part of the Philippines, it can also be done anywhere else, including Eastern Visayas. The question is, are we willing to do it? Do we need a task force and a secretary to destroy these infrastructures that are within the salvage zone? So that's my question. Although there are many other related policies, let me focus on these compelling policy issues which I feel must be addressed. As I have mentioned earlier, the implementation of easement, salvage buffer protection, or Nobel Zone along coasts is one thing. The waste you will find in coastal areas is also an evidence of non-implementation of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, this Republic Act 9003. I also propose that regular monitoring and evaluation of policies be conducted, and ideally, this monitoring, evaluation, and learning results should be inputted back into the planning process, and shall be used to strengthen the implementation of the laws or policies. Now, therefore, my call of action is for Eastern Visayas: restore the beech forest, restore the mangrove forest, rehabilitate the seagrasses, and protect the coral reefs through establishment of more MPAs, marine protected areas. And it has been my advocacy, as an environmental science practitioner, to encourage people, to redeem our generation from the misdeeds of the past. We have powerful organizations, if we can only mobilize them. By recognizing the problem and the willingness to do something to address the problem, which we call as political will. This is a very important word, but it's one thing everywhere, especially when it comes to implementation of environmental policies. And this can be done through climate proofing, And here I am advocating for the establishment of coastal green shields, for resiliency, because doing the right thing moves us forward. So my warmest thanks for your attention. Good Climate Proofing Day. Thank you very much. That ends my presentation.
It's good to know, sir, na practice natin kung ano yung what we learned dun sa ating mga capacity building, particularly dun sa yung CP4D. And I would like
Climate
to
proofing for development.
yes, sir. I would like to commend yung efforts nyo,
Thank you,
particularly
Jen.
UP Tacloban, on coming up with the study ba yun or project?
Yes, project po.
Focus sa regional capital natin, yung Tacloban City. Now, I think later ko na lang siguro ibibigay ko na lang siguro yung in terms of evaluating yung vulnerability chart natin kasi we have Sir Erwin here. I think it's more within the technical capacity of CCC in analyzing yung vulnerability approach natin. But somehow, just to provide you with an overview, yun po I think yung ginagamit ng Climate Change Commission and also with other agencies such as yung Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development in coming up with their climate and disaster risk assessment in CDRA in treating climate change adaptation. However, kung matitingnan natin yung impact chain diagram po natin, specifically for Tacloban, I think there's a need for us to focus kung ano yung pinaka-priority sector natin so that it can be a part of the coastal population in terms of what barangay kung para maging specific yung ating gagawing intervention later. Parang hindi siya yung shotgun na approach na kahit sino pwedeng matarget natin, but we need to be very specific as much as possible. So at the moment kasi, the way I look at it, it's still very broad and maraming sector yung ating na-present. Although I think there's within your project or document, merong sectoral disaggregation po yun. The use of, in terms of the use of nature or yung building with nature strategy, actually, yung midterm update natin ng ating Eastern Visayas Regional Development Plan, 2017 to 2022, which is our regional share towards attaining the goals ng ating Philippine Development Plan, same time frame po. It is one for yung mga strategies na in-identify doon in increasing our resiliency ng ating mga coastal ecosystems and most specifically yung adaptive capacities and resilience ng ating mga communities na nandun po. In terms of yung existing laws natin, I think it is true that I think we have enacted several of it and some of which are due for ano nga pa yun, yung review and amendment na. But the big question is yung in terms of implementation and enforcement of these laws, wherein our local government unit nasa forefront in protecting our environment have that shared and devolved authority in terms of implementing this national or national laws. So I think doon lang po muna yung mga comments ko, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That was very constructive. Yes, there may be a need to disintegrate, no, but eventually we really need to connect all components, no, of the ecosystem. Like the one thing I like about this climate proofing project because it looks into the tandem, interrelationships of the biophysical system and the socio-economic systems, which demands for simultaneous way to address the problem. Hindi siya pwedeng sa biophysical system ka lang muna, or sa socio-economic system lang muna. They have to be done simultaneously kasi they are affecting each other. Otherwise, wala siyang impact.
Good afternoon po, sir.
Good afternoon.
Congratulations po sa inyong presentation. Actually, I'm pleased to see na gumamit po kayo ng mapping technology as one of your references in the development of the proposal kasi we recognize the need for local interventions to be science-based talaga, especially pagdating dito sa mga coastal areas natin. As far as the presentation is concerned, aside from the use of the maps, which is very crucial in developing areas na we have to be concerned with, yung mga sites ng mangrove forestation areas. I'm also pleased to see po na ginamit nyo din yung isa sa mga steps ng CDRA, yung simplified CDRA version, which is crucial. As mentioned po ni Sir JR, marami pong sectors, 5 sectors yung titingnan natin pagdating sa LCCAP development, and I'd like to support his proposal po na we further specify kung anong sector yung titingnan. Pagdating naman dun sa coastal areas, usually ang titingnan dyan yung mga urban use areas, yung population, yung mga critical facilities, mga ganun po. Para din, as mentioned ni Sir JR, alam natin kung ano ba yung specific intervention base kung ano yung nakita nating indirect tsaka direct impacts ng climate stimulus. Napansin ko din po na dun sa inyong presentation, it's very focused on the coastal area, and if I may put additional info lang po dun sa inyong material, I'm not very sure if sea level rise was one of the considerations dun po sa inyong pong presentation. But if I may, sir, if I may cite lang po yung data that we have from Pag-asa na sea level rise has been observed east of the islands of Leyte and Samar, increase of 4.5 to 5 millimeters per year. So when we do yung ating po mga coastal activities, we suggest po na we also take consideration of yung projections for sea level rise kasi especially sa coastal communities sa mga major considerations natin aside from mga storm surges na which will be hopefully lessened pag marami na yung mga green belts such as yung mangrove forest sa coastal areas. But sea level rise is also a major consideration for the coastal cities. So yun po muna, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes. Yes, you are correct. No, we may need to be very specific about addressing certain sectors, because my presentation is very general. It's just a socio-economic component. We can subdivide that into different sectors and do some kind of analysis, as to what sector is should be prioritized and given support. For the sea level rise, yes, it's true, not really much considered because we are not feeling it yet. What we consider is based on our experience, the storm surge, which was very high, and so that becomes the point of our reference when we do study or implement projects. Yes, that's 4.5 to 5 millimeters per year is quite high. In fact, I have seen the projection of Dr. Lori Tan of WWF at 5 meter sea level rise to 7 meter. I think the cost, the airport of Tacloban City will be submerged. As to when this will happen, well, science cannot even exactly predict when, but there is such possibility 5 meters sea level rise, and many parts of Tacloban City will be submerged to water. In fact, when I was trained in GIZ in 2011, I had this thinking already of rehabilitating, no, or transferring some structures in Tacloban City to a separate ground, until 2013 during the typhoon. There's no need to tell the LGUs, and government officials concerned, because we are now rehabilitating Tacloban City and moving settlements to the safer north side of the city. But still, we experience, nandoon pa rin yung mga coastal settlements kasi, but not much anymore. There are already initial, LGU initiatives here, on clearing the coastal areas. But it has to be intensified. I commend, the clearing of this coastal area, but it needs to be really intensified.
Ang primary basis talaga natin dyan, sir, right now is the development of the respective local climate change action plans. And kung wala pa silang LCCAP, is the mainstreaming of climate change in their either CLUP or CDP. No, base po sa DILG data that we have, as of last year naman, mataas ang compliance sa Region 8. It's about 85%. So out of the 6 provinces, 4 already have their LCCAPs. Out of the 143 cities and municipalities, that's including Tacloban, 122 na yung merong LCCAP. So in terms of the extent of climate proofing, base po sa nireport ng mga LGUs, mataas yung compliance natin sa ganitong aspeto. It's 85%. What we also need to look at as well is, aside from the reported compliance or presence of these documents, is actually evaluating the content and format of the document. Right now, the CCC together with the ILG is developing a tool for this, so we check if the submitted local climate change action plans are actually responsive to the vulnerability of the community. And base din po sa mga data na nakuha natin, ang pinaka matandang updated LCCAP is for municipalities is 2014. For cities, it's the oldest one is no 2015, and for the provinces no 2017. So nasa ano pa naman, malapit-lapit pa naman sa 2021, but there's also a need to update, especially for that one municipality sa Region 8 na 2014 pa yung kanilang LCCAP. But we have the CDRA as the tool for that, so that the LGUs can actually look at what are their vulnerabilities, how do they identify yung appropriate climate change adaptation mitigation options nila to respond to these vulnerabilities.
It is good to know, that we have this kind of monitoring already, and I'm very glad to also learn that we have documents. At least we are writing what we intend to do, but it should not stop there. We have to check, in real life, ano ba talaga yung nangyari sa field level. Kasi fieldman kasi ako Doon talaga ako nagbabase. Is there significant change at the field level with respect to vulnerability reduction? So I think we have already established criteria, on how to measure vulnerability. So nag-improve ba talaga yung vulnerability? Because what I see, in my framework, GIZ framework, parang yung before Typhoon Yolanda at saka ngayon, parang ganun pa rin yung situation at the field level. But I'm happy na we are starting writing. At least meron tayong document. But I really want to see how it is translated, in real condition.
Pero sir, isa pa natin pwedeng tingnan dito is yung compliance ng mga LGUs dun sa kanilang climate change expenditure tagging. Kasi for them to identify their respective climate change adaptation mitigation options. They're also required to submit kung magkano ba yung nilalaan nilang pondo for this. That would help us
I attended
quantify,
your orientation.
Yeah.
It was
Yes, sir.
very
If,
enlightening.
kasi that would tell us kung yes, meron identified program pero may funding pa ba to implement the programs ng LGU. Kasi usually challenge talaga yan sa local level kung sasapat ba yung pondo na meron si city, municipality, province to actually implement the programs that we think would respond to their vulnerability.
It's good. In your training, you included SUCs, no? That's why I attended the training. And we seem to have a problem relating to your prescription, no? Nga kailangan itaging yung climate change expenditure. Kasi in reality, we don't have really fund. Wala kaming fund, as far as I know, dedicated for that purpose.
Yes, sir. Ito naman for monitoring natin kung nagagawa ba o kung may impacts ba talaga on the ground yung interventions. So before we can determine kung may impacts, isang qualifier kasi para ma-check natin yun kung na-implement. Kung walang pondo, si LGU, most likely hindi naman nila ma-implement. So we have the CCA-D for national government agencies, including SUCs, and we also have yung tagging for local government units. So if the concerned LGUs po are able to comply with the CCA-D, reporting kung magkano nakaalat na budget, isa pong indicator kung effective ba yung programa nila. Right now, base po sa mga latest submissions kay CCC, sa Region 8, we have 3 LGUs lang yung compliant since tatlo yung nag-submit for last year, 3 din this year so far nakakapag-submit ng kanilang CCET submissions, and yung Tacloban City, consistent since 2017.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Meron po ba tayong mga sanctions yung hindi mag-comply?
Wala pang identified sanctions, sir, pero ngayon kasi ang requirement ay bago nila ma-submit yung kanilang tag programs, kailangan na-review muna ni CCC to check if tama ba yung ni-report na programa, kung adaptation mitigation activity ba siya, may corresponding typology ba, so that can determine kung sa anong strategic priority siya na NCCAP naka-align. Kasi tinitingnan natin yung alignment ng local initiatives sa national plans. Sanctions right now wala pa, pero one advantage of LGUs complying to the CCET is them having another document as a requirement for them to access the People's Survival Fund kung wala silang sufficient funding for their local interventions. Kasi the CCET compliance would imply that a particular program is actually intended to be conducted by an LGU. It's just that wala silang funding for that, so they would have the PSF as a supplementary funding source for that.
May I know if we have already LGU recipient of PSF fund in Region 8? Meron na bang nakatanggap?
Hindi ako masyado updated, sir, sa naka-pipeline na activities, pero yung mga na-approve na, karamihan ay nasa Mindanao. We have yung Kitcharao, we have in Surigao del Norte, we have one in Sarangani, we have one in Herona, Tarlac. I believe 6 na yung na approved na PSF proposals. Though may naka-pipeline, hindi lang po ako updated dun sa mismong project at kung sino yung mga proponent. Kaya din may mga interventions din yung ating PSF unit to actually capacitate LGUs to develop their proposals. Meron po tayong online learning program so that LGUs can go through this set of modules to help them develop their proposals and eventually submit a proposal to the PSF. Right now, sir, I'm not knowledgeable of any proposal from Region 8 that has been approved. Baka po nasa pipeline. I'm not just socially sa pipeline activities.
Meron
if I may,
sige na po. JR?
Sir, yes, apologies. Well, actually yung province of Leyte, kung hindi ko lang maalala kung anong year sila nag-submit, but they asked for our assistance in following up yung PSS proposal nila that they submitted to CCC. Well, somehow wala pa atang nare-receive na update yung province, but nevertheless yung ginawa namin kasi in-endorse lang namin yung follow-up letter ni Governor towards the Climate Change Commission, Sir Erwin.
Sir, para ma-assist ko po kayo din sa pag-follow up, kailan po yung proposal na submit? Kahit yung year lang, para I can inform our technical personnel po sa PSF.
2021 na ngayon. Maybe mga 1.5 year ago at before tayo nag-pandemic. Kasi I understand gawa nitong pandemic, meron tayong mga limitations in terms of yung ating human resource sa ating mga offices, yung pag-evaluate ng project. Yun po, sir.
Yun daw, sir, ay nakapasa na sa desk review ng Secretariat.
I cannot say that as of now, sir, kasi yun nga, we are yet to receive yung or baka nag-reply na si CCC directly dun sa province, hindi lang kami na copy furnish in between the transmission.
Sige, sir. I will double check with our PSF unit. If mga 1.5 years ago, kung nag-submit na po yung province ng proposal, most probably it's with the Secretariat sa DOF, and then it will be subjected to the desk review. If kumpleto yung initial requirements, saka po pupunta yun sa CCC for technical review. And then since may challenge nga tayo ngayon sa paglabas-labas at pag-travel, baka doon nagkaroon ng concern. No? Pero we will check po proposal from the provincial government of Leyte. Sige, sir.
Yes, sir.
I will check with our PSF unit, sir, para ma-update po namin si Sir Casas on the proposal. Perhaps he can inform you po.
Sa province, wala akong participation doon.
Ay, sorry.
Sa province po, yun.
Okay. Hello? Sige po. We'll request the PSF unit to coordinate with the provincial government do sa status ng kanilang proposal. Kung nakaabot na kay CCC.
As a start, I think sa mga implementing agencies, hindi po kami kasali doon si NEDA. Hindi po kasi kami nag-implement ng project. So we only coordinate and orchestrate yung mga development projects within nationwide or region or sub-regional na level. As much as possible, I think yung ating mga implementing agencies need to stop working in silos. Yung parang ito lang yung sector ko, dito lang ako magtatrabaho. Wala akong pakialam dun sa mga other sectors na hinahandle ng ibang agencies. We need to stop that way of implementing our project. One, I think best practice that we can replicate is working with convergence. Yung mga implementing agencies, like they identify areas wherein they can pour in together the different programs and projects para walang overlapping ng mga beneficiaries, walang overlapping ng area of interest, so to speak. So parang nagagamit natin yung pera ng bayan very efficiently. Now, the Eastern Visayas Regional Development Plan midterm update has identified a strategy towards the achievement of adaptive capacities and resilience of ecosystems to strengthen the implementation of yung mga DRR and climate change adaptation at the local level across sectors. Now, specifically, strengthening existing interagency bodies that serves as venues for improving policy making in implementation of these programs and projects is one of those mga strategies na in-identify natin sa ating medium-term development plan. Now, pending the creation of an interagency that will cater to yung lahat talaga yung DRR concerns, yung existing interagency and interlocal venues might be further strengthened, such as yung mga interagency councils natin, yung mga DRR councils. I think there's a need to further strengthen those yung mga ganong mga collegial bodies. Further, I think horizontal and vertical integration of climate resilient planning, programming and budgeting on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction should also be ensured para merong coordination between and among plans, and also integration from the national towards the local or local towards the national. Now, one example is I think the risk resiliency program of the government, which is aimed to provide an enabling environment for integrating planning, programming, and also budgeting. Gawa ito ng, I think, resolution number 1, if I'm not wrong, a series of 2019 or 2018 by the Cabinet Cluster on CCA and DRR, wherein programs and projects and activities will be implemented adopting the program convergence budgeting na approach, or yung PCB approach, wherein ginawa to ng Cabinet Cluster. Meron silang guidance document for 2020 up to 2022. So under the PCB approach, yung mga government agencies natin will aim to work as one. So wala na yung surfing ng mga yung, like, for example, beneficiaries and other concerns like that. So to meet common objectives in the government's priorities. Now, instead of competing for budgets, the PCB reinforces the government's push for more prudent and targeted spending. So we can work with the yung mga budget na kalimitan in terms of climate change adaptation or DRR, medyo limitado. So as much as possible na focus natin saan mas kailangan sila or mas priority. By fostering collaboration among implementing agencies with some lead and participating agencies in planning, budgeting, and implementing this priority project.
Isa po sa nakita namin dito is yung nabanggit po ni Sir JR na yung horizontal and vertical planning, and yung whole of society, whole of government approach. Kasi we recognize that climate change cannot be solved just by one sector or by one agency. It's crucial that stakeholders are engaged, involved in addressing the respective vulnerability in their locality. So isa po sa tinitingnan namin is actually the provision of technical assistance to the LGU pagdating sa LCCAP development through the HEIs, yung aming pong local program, kung saan yung need ng LGUs, yung technical capacity for research, would be complemented by the expertise of our higher education institutions. Kaya po dun sa aming Community Persons Program, isa sa mga target audience po talaga nun is yung HEIs, capacitating them on the process of LCCAP, and so that they in turn would provide the necessary assistance sa mga LGUs sa mga lugar nila. And crucial din po talaga is actually facing the realities on the ground. Ano ba yung challenges na meron sa mga LGU natin? At ano po to, may mga several challenges talaga sila that affects how they identify, develop, implement, and actually monitor yung mga climate proofing activities. In as much as, yes, we do have national policies and tools such as the CCA-DRR that would guide the LGUs in their climate proofing activities, marami ding dynamics on the ground na kailangan tutukan. Isa dito yung capacity of the personnel to gather data, kasi pagdating sa CCA-DRR, ano talaga siya, it's a data-intensive process that would require time dun sa mga personnel natin sa local level para kunin yung data sa bawat sector na tinitingnan sa CCA-DRR para ma-process nila properly yung appropriate interventions. And then yung kailangan din natin tingnan, aside from capacity, is the availability of personnel. We recognize na in some LGUs, ang isang personnel would have overlapping functions. Pwedeng penro siya, tapos MAU din siya, tapos may iba pa siyang functions, and this actually impacts how a particular service is delivered. No? At minsan pa, may kakulangan din tayo sa plantilla personnel. Kaya ang ni-request talaga ni CCC sa mga capacity building activities natin is yung plantilla personnel para yung knowledge management, yung retention ng information for the use of the LGU would be secured. Kasi ang challenge natin kapag hindi plantilla personnel ang atin ng training, pag hindi na-renew yung personnel, yung kaalaman, yung kahusayan na pwede niyang makuha from the trainings, not just from CCC but from other government agencies, hindi ma-retain sa LGU. So yung capacity would have to be improved again kapag may bagong personnel na pumasok. And then yung sa ngayon nakikita namin, and this is from the next point would be from the point of view of SPD, not yet of the CCC, but yung the need for a clear focal unit for climate change adaptation concerns. Kasi right now, we do have the DRRMOs, and that is good for the LGUs, no? Pero yung delineation kung climate change adaptation ba siya, DRR ba siya, environmental concern ba siya, kaino papasok yung function na yun? Sinong mag-handle? If there would be a specific office with appropriate number of personnel that would really handle specifically climate change concerns for the LGU, that would be beneficial para, kumbaga, in terms of expertise and accountability, alam natin kung sinong pupuntahan natin sa local level for climate proofing requirements. And then reality then on the ground, yung kakulangan ng budget, no, especially for 4 to 6 class municipalities. Itong mga LGU na to usually are at the forefront of the brunt of climate impacts, pero sila yung walang sapat na resources para makapag-hire ng personnel, makakuha ng technology, tulad ng mga nagagamit ni Dr. Casas, yung mga mapping technologies, para makaka-contribute sa climate proofing initiatives nila. And ultimately, yung political dynamics on the ground, no? Yung sustainability ng mga magandang programa na might be coming from another political party of either the next or incumbent political leadership. They will recognize the executive or legislative agenda of each LCEs. It's just that this is a reality on the ground, no? Na minsan because of the change in leadership, there are some programs that are not continued because iba yung magiging direction ng particular LGU base sa ano yung nakikita direksyon na kailangan ng incumbent na leadership. So, yun po mga yan.
If I may add, to the summary of the key points which are provided by John. Another avenue is that our region, Eastern Visayas in particular, has adopted the Baywide Coastal Zoning and Land Use Framework for the San Pedro Bay and the Leyte Gulf Basin, and I think Dr. Casas here has also been one of those also instrumental in the preparation of this framework plan during the conduct of a number or series of workshops. Now, this framework plan defines the spatial strategy to guide the land and water use decisions to mitigate the impact of climate change in a number of local government units along the coastline of San Pedro Bay and the Leyte Gulf. Further, it also provides the strategic and policy framework for the sustainable and resilient development path for the management of the terrestrial, coastal, and also the marine resources, and will serve as basis for the preparation of this number of LGU's comprehensive land use plan. Well, actually, in terms of map preparation, they can lift or serve this document as reference in terms of preparing their zoning ordinances kasi meron na po itong mga maps which are in GIS ready format. Now also subsequently as also input towards the finalization of our region's ongoing updating of the physical framework plan. So yun po yung parang last na takeaway dun sa may add ko dun kay John. Now as closing, I think we all know that yung Supreme Court has already ruled over yung Mandanas case, yung Mandanas ruling, which can boost our local government units economy by year 2022, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So this ruling is a double-edged sword. So pwede siyang maging limiter sa ating mga local government units, but also on the other side of that, this can also serve as an avenue para sa pag-boost ng mga projects which I think we have already mentioned na yung mga local government units, particularly 5th, 6th class local government units are limited in terms of budget allocation sa kanilang mga climate change adaptation and DRR na mga intervention para ma-lower down yung vulnerabilities ng ating community and also with that of our ecosystem. So with this ruling, or somehow, it's also a challenge sa ating mga local government units that they must prepare for this kind of responsibility come 2022. So malaking challenge ito sa ating local government unit, but somehow huwag natin pabayaan yung ating mga LGUs din. The academe, tayo sa national government should readily provide technical assistance in terms of let's say proposal preparation sa ating mga local government units, kasi I think for one, LGUs are very adept or magagaling silang magplano, yung ating mga LGUs. Lahat ng siguro ng mga plans ginagawa ng ating LGU sa kanilang sa kanilang MPDC o yung MPDO, yung Municipal Planning and Development Office. Now, these plans dito maisa sa katuparan without the proper proposal for it to be considered as implementation ready. Kasi yun yung tinitingnan na criteria ng ating budget department in providing the appropriate finance or yung pera para may implement yung project. So with that, I think the Mandanas ruling will serve as an avenue para sa ating mga LGUs na may tupad kung ano man yung mga nasa plano nila, yung sa LUP, sa Local Climate Change Action Plan nila, and hopefully ma-attain natin yung ating medium-term goal towards the achievement of our long-term vision in ating country. Thank you.
Climate proofing at the local level will definitely benefit from ecosystem-based approach and nature-based solutions. And equally important to these strategies is actually looking at our low-emission development strategies, because climate change mitigation is still the best adaptation strategy base nga dun sa ongoing na Asia-Pacific Climate Change Forum. We need to look at how do we pursue development in a way that would benefit the people without harming the environment. And if we want to make sure that we are progressing sustainably, the development and implementation of low-emission development strategies along with nature-based solutions is a good way to go.
Thank you very much, Leyte-Samar Heritage Center, through the leadership of Dr. Stephen Lagarde, for this opportunity to officially share my professional advocacy, which is climate proofing. Thank you also to my panel of reactors for sharing their insights. And I'm also learning from their updates on what their respective offices are presently doing with respect to the climate proofing as a development approach. I am very glad to hear them using climate proofing. So let us then popularize and together advocate climate proofing as our climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction and management approach. Thank you very much.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, our third episode of Hisgut Kalibungan entitled Huruhisgutay number 3, Climate Proofing and Resilience in Eastern Visayas. We trust that given this discussion forum, you have gained important insights as well as acquired a renewed understanding about this afternoon's episode. Based on the said discussion forum, please allow us to present to you Mr. John de la Cruz, University Research Associate of the Leyte-Samar Heritage Center, who shall recapitulate the highlights of this online discussion forum.
This episode of Hisgut Kalibungan series focuses on climate proofing as a tool in mainstreaming climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction in local resource development, particularly in coastal communities and environment. Climate change refers to the change in the global or regional climate patterns, which is largely attributed to the increasing levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere produced by the use of fossil fuels. Like the majority of the communities in Eastern Visayas, coastal areas are found to be more vulnerable to the effects of climate change, like sea level rise and natural hazards like typhoons. In other words, the environment, economy, and the living conditions of the people living within these areas are vulnerable to disruption, especially during extreme weather events. One way to avoid or minimize the ill effects of climate change is by employing climate proofing, which is a tool that can help prevent injury or loss of life and damage or destruction to properties. At the same time, climate proofing helps reduce adverse economic impacts, enhance disaster preparedness, and build and expand disaster resilient communities and ecosystems. The detrimental effects experienced by the people and environment in eastern Visayas in the aftermath of Super Typhoon Yolanda has served as a wake-up call for local authorities and concerned organizations here and abroad to implement nature-based solutions to combat climate change. For example, ecosystem-based solutions like rehabilitation and restoration of degraded coastal ecosystems such as mangroves, beach forests, seagrass beds, and coral reefs has been undertaken across the affected areas to restore the ecosystem that these natural ecosystems provide. Essentially, this coastal ecosystem acts as primary line of defense against natural hazards like strong winds, intense typhoons, tsunamis, and storm surge. Likewise, building of seawalls, tidal flood control structures, and clearing of human settlements and built structures along coastal buffer or no-build zones in Yolanda-affected areas, like in Palo and Tacloban City, had been implemented to help prevent disasters caused by natural hazards. However, there are certain challenges that have to be addressed in order to formulate and implement appropriate climate-proofing strategies, particularly at the local level. These major challenges include the lack of integration of climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies in local resource development owing to the lack of information on climate change vulnerability specific for the community, and the lack of manpower and physical resources to conduct climate change and vulnerability assessment and implement climate proofing interventions. Now, based on the panel discussion, the following recommendations are put forward to help mainstream climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies in local resource development. First is to explore convergence with local government units, line government agencies, academe, and other stakeholders. By fostering partnerships with the community, line government organizations, other LGUs, and other stakeholders, local authorities will be able to address challenges regarding the lack of technical expertise and knowledge as well as the shortage of physical resources and manpower in conducting climate and disaster risk assessments and in mainstreaming climate change adaptation and disaster risk mitigation in local resource development. Second is to ensure total vertical integration of climate resilient planning, programming, and budgeting. LGUs must incorporate regional, national, and international goals and targets in their respective local resource development plans, programs, projects, and policies so as to avoid, minimize, or compensate for the ill effects of climate change. And uh, this can be done by harmonizing and integrating climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies in the Comprehensive Land Use Plan and the Comprehensive Development Plan of the LGU. Doing so would enable the LGUs gain an additional advantage to access the People's Survival Fund or the PSF, which requires climate change expenditure tagging. Third is to develop more specific climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies for each development sector. Now, LGUs must be able to demonstrate or present more specific climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction strategies for each of the following development sectors: social, economic, physical, environmental, and institutional, and articulate such solutions or strategies in the comprehensive development plan among other development frameworks used by the local government unit. Fourth is to face the realities on the ground. In formulating climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies, the proposed solution must be reflective of and responsive to the experiences and realities of the people and environment in focus. Fifth, employ community-based and participatory approaches in responding to climate change vulnerability and disaster risk. Employing bottom-up approach is one of the key strategies in developing informed and appropriate responses to avoid or reduce the impacts of climate change and to enhance the adaptive capacity of the people and environment. Sixth, capacitate academic institutions in order to help national government agencies assist LGUs in mainstreaming climate proofing in local resource development. The Climate Change Commission of the Philippines has already acknowledged the potential contribution of higher education institutions in helping LGUs draft their own local climate change adaptation plans or LCCAPs and in mainstreaming climate and disaster risk assessment in local resource development. Thus, the Climate Change Commission should intensify its campaign to build the capacity of HEIs, which in turn will help the local government units integrate climate-proofing initiatives in their plans, programs, projects, and policies for purposes of sustainable development. 7. Establish a focal unit for climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction needs and concerns at the local and regional level. This proposed action will help the local government units avoid overlapping functions and harmonize processes and programs within its executive domain. At the same time, the focal unit will ensure that the sustainability of the programs, projects, and policies on climate change regardless of the political climate. Likewise, an inter-LGU and interagency body or alliance at the regional level, like for example a consortium on climate change, will be helpful in addressing climate change concerns from the systems level perspective. Both these strategies will help the Climate Change Commission amplify its effort to build and expand the network of disaster resilient communities and environment in Eastern Visayas and beyond. 8 is to review and update existing LCCAPs and other policies related to climate change adaptation and mitigation. Regular review and updating of development plans, programs, projects, and policies must be done to address emerging concerns brought about by the rapidly changing society and environment. On the other hand, the results of the review of the policies, as well as the results of the monitoring and evaluation of completed and ongoing programs and projects, should be used as inputs to guide the policymakers and implementers in developing new interventions in response to existing and emerging climate change concerns. And lastly, intensify the education, information, and communication campaign among the locals to enhance their awareness and appreciation of climate change, its impacts, and what can be done to avoid the disasters caused by natural hazards. These proposed actions are presented to help the local government units and local stakeholders enhance local disaster preparedness and to build disaster resilient people and environment in Eastern Visayas and beyond.
Friends, we hope that this third episode has deepened and broadened our awareness and understanding about climate proofing and resilience in Eastern Visayas. We would like to remind everyone that Hisgut Kalibungan may be viewed on the Facebook page of the Leyte-Samar Heritage Center as well as the official Facebook page of UPV Tacloban College. Thank you very much for being part of this meaningful online presentation. We look forward to having all of you again in future Hisgut Kalibugan online events of the Leyte-Samar Heritage Center of UPV Tacloban College. Maupay nga kulop, haaton nga tanan.